Hi, it's Jen back with a very Merry Christmas. This time we're focusing on the house block right straight away. Again, if you're kind of cutting as we go, sizing. Before, we've had the opportunity on some of our blocks to be able to upsize and trim down. Not the case on this particular block. This is the most complicated element, in my opinion, on the quilt. Lots of pieces. If you're ever going to grab for the Oops kit, it's likely to be on this block. However, if we're very careful, definitely measure twice, cut once, and are very true to our 1/4 inch seam allowance, the block should come out just fine. Just be very careful, read through those instructions, and then proceed. We're going to start this off with our roof here. I thought this was a really clever way for her to get her chimney in. Kind of added to the roof, which started with, and I've already pieced that together this morning, it was just 3 rectangles, sewing a very careful 1/4 inch seam allowance and pressing those seams open. This will be placed on the right side of that, and I need to do a sew and flip. We've been doing sew and flip. That's not new to you, but we're used to it just being a solid piece of fabric and not having these extra seams in there. So I'm going to carefully kind of press those seams flat with my ruler and place that right in that corner and pin. We'll be sewing directly on the line and flipping and trimming. And that's how we'll be getting our roof. Now the opposite side, same thing. Might as well just do that all at the same time in one little trip to the sewing machine. Here on the opposite side, this one's easy peasy, right? We've been doing that one all along. Sew on the line, we'll check it, press to the outside. Here, we'll sew on the line, check that, trim away, and we will have our roof unit. So let me just go get that sewn down. We'll press and trim, and we'll put that aside for much later on when we're assembling the lower part of the house with our roof. So let's press that before we trim anything. Make sure we're happy with what we're seeing. And same here. Pretty clever way to make a chimney there. I like that technique a lot. Patchwork pins are going to be your friend on many parts of this. Some pieces, though, are too small for patchwork pins, so we'll be using them at times, not using them at others. Okay. We'll put that aside. We have some very interesting techniques that, and very specific techniques about these window units right here. I want to call your attention to this. This is one of the most challenging parts of this quilt block is right here. These are called mulligans. I've always just called them the grids. Technically, I guess they're called mulligans. The challenge is trying to get them to line up left to right so they appear seamless. So I'm going to give you some techniques that are going to help that, and this is very unusual, the technique that our makers did to create this block. And so I'm just going to show it to you. We're going to start right here, but this is what we're showing you. So we started off with, well, right here. Let me just bring this over so you can see it. I know the white can kind of tend to disappear against the white cutting mat. I have 2 squares and I have a rectangle. Looking at this construction right here, we found that first off, you can't just press everything to the middle. It's too much of a collision of fabric. It's a very narrow bridge right there. And if I press everything toward the middle, it's too much bulk. Pressing away also seemed to create a problem. So what our makers did is for the very first fabric, they sewed here their 1/4 inch seam, and you can see that in this instance, this one is pressed toward the white. They added the other square to that and pressed toward the red. So all seams are traveling in one direction. Very, very clever. So I will, in fact, in order for us to be able to construct that, I will need to actually go accomplish that myself. So let me go do that. But I wanted to show you what the focus is. Not intuitive. I know I wouldn't have come up with that. My instinct would have been press away. And that is what they initially did for both of those. But then they found that the alignment became a little bit challenging left to right, and that what this ended up doing was allowing for some interlocking seams right there. Very, very clever. So I do want to do this other unit so we can experience that together and see why this technique is being recommended, and it's very effective. Let me press this away. I want less going on right now. I was going to sew them both on and then press in the end. I'm going to press now. So tiny. All of you out there that love that miniature quilting, miniature sewing, man, those are some of the, I think, some of the more complicated quilts because everything's so small. You don't get to pin a lot of times. There's not room for pinning. So it really, really relies on you holding everything good and steady as you sew. And man, the smaller the quilt block, the more accurate that 1/4 inch seam allowance simply has to be. Okay, let's sew this on. I think I will sew actually from the back side. Okay, so all seams traveling in the same direction. Now, as we are down, let's focus on this right here and this center kind of bridge. Notice how on this one, let's just flip it over so we can match that. One is going down where all the seams are traveling in this direction, and the other one is traveling in that direction. So let's flip that over. And with this strip on the bottom, we don't want to sew with the strip on the top because these may roll back on us. For that reason, we will have our red on top, on the bottom. And we will sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I can see that, press the seam open. Let's bring that together here. Boy, I so want to press to the center, but we, just like before, there's no room. There will not be room for all of those seams to press toward the center, so we need to press open here. That seam does not want to press back on itself at all. Our challenge on this one, let's look where we are. That seam's going up. This seam is going down. Our challenge is to make sure this mulligan is straight across. Now technically, these are the same size and they appear to be. So let's give that a go. I am going to put a pin in there. I don't want anything to move. So before, remember how I had you press that open? On the next one that I sewed on, there's no room to press another seam open, so it really tucks under. Really cool right there how that, this seam and this seam, right? We could have pressed away, but again, it would have been a very awkward folding everything back on itself. So that other seam will tuck underneath that one that's pressed open. Then all we do is simply sew our shutters on and pressing toward the shutters. So I'm going to talk you through a few of the steps that I will do off camera just to speed this up. We have a lot of distance to still travel together. So let me just jump over to this next part of our pattern. And this is where we have our rectangle, rectangle, rectangle. We would of course we had our other unit here. So we're going to be assembling this right here. We have this extra strip sewn on, but just ignore that. We're basically going to make this unit with these pieces. This, what I'm going to complete here with the shutters sewn on, and then we'll complete that vertically. This one is a mirror of that, and we just happen to sew on the outside piece. But just like this, once I have this top rectangle, my windows, the next rectangle, my windows, and the next rectangle, we're sewing on our side strip and of course pressing to that. I will get us to that stage. Once I come back, we'll continue making our house together. So I have the left side of the house done with this sashing strip. And of course, I have my other one that I would simply sew to the right side. When I sewed this one on, I did sew from my back side. I pinned well here in the corner, make it fit. All right, it definitely will fit, but be sure you're sewing from this side so you're keeping an eye on all of those seams, nothing's rolling back on you. And then of course you're pressing toward that sashing. That's how you'll be completing that side. This is simply a mirror of that. And again, you know, right side together, pin in this corner, and then make everything else fit. Sew on the back side, press toward that sashing. For this center section, this is not anything you haven't seen in a previous block. We'll have our white square with our tiny little red polka dot squares. Draw the line corner to corner, placing them on each of the four corners, sewing directly on that line. Press the outside, make sure you're happy with the sewn line, trim away, and that's how you're creating that kind of, is that an octagon? Window there. And then you can see we have looks like two rectangles, one above, one below. Then we'll add our door. course, we have now this section, our center section, our right section, sewing all of that together. Then you can see here, as let me bring that out. I'm just going to talk you through the rest of the block because there's nothing mysterious here. It's more of a sequencing of what comes next, and the pattern does a great job of talking you through that. Once you have this portion done, that's when our roof will come into play. Of course, right side together, pressing, I think we probably pressed downward on that. Looks like we did. And I'll make sure I flip my block over so you're seeing all the pressing. And then in the very end, we have 2 strips coming on that'll be sewn on the very outside, left and right side, pressing to the outside. So I'm going to flip that over so you can get a good look of that at our pressing from above and seeing what we did here. So we just walked through really very methodically a block that I feel is the most complicated block. And you can see that when we just break it down into steps, follow our good disciplines of good pressing, pinning when we can, quarter and seam allowance, we can take a block that's complicated and make it actually very functional and very easy. So you'll of course complete just one of those blocks. I will be back to do our stockings. Now, if you should desire at that point to sew this whole section together, you could do that. You can see there is a strip in between our Christmas trees. Remember, we were only able to kind of complete this section and this one, but we couldn't really join them because of the house block. If at this time you want to go ahead and join that, by all means do that. But I will be back as we walk our way through our stocking block. And then for our week after that, we'll be focusing on our wreaths. So I'll see you next week as we continue our journey of making this very special quilt from Stacy Eats You.